is something which I've been wanting to do for a long time. Meet a living legend, talk about legends of 4x4, and what better moment to do that than the impending arrival of the new Land Rover Defender. Well, in my long career, 44 years of wielding so many different hats, looking at motorsport, going off the road, going on road, going at places where you never thought anyone would move, meeting great people, experiencing some of the most innovative ideas in automotive engineering the world over, and of course also in India. I have got an opportunity to speak with a legend who I share a symbiotic link with. Let me explain. Roger Crathorne is known as Mr. Land Rover. He is going to be with me today to educate me, fill me up with a lot of stories about Land Rover. And he did his engineering apprenticeship with Land Rover many years ago. Well, let me also tell you that I also got into this line. I did my engineering apprenticeship with Telco, which is what Tata Motors is known as today. And as you know, Tata Motors owns Land Rover. So I think there's a good meeting of minds. And I want to say that no one could better reveal facets of Land Rover history better than Roger Crathorne. Welcome, Roger, to this epic episode which we are trying to do as part of the startup to the launch of the new Land Rover Defender. So, can you tell me, first and foremost, how did Land Rover get into being?
Hello, Adil. Yes, it goes back some years, more than 70 years, to a period just after the Second World War, when the Wilks brothers, who were running the Rover company, wondered how they were going to keep their employees, all that skilled labour that they had in employment, when people weren't ordering luxury motor cars like Rover cars. During the Easter holiday of 1947, Maurice Wilks was at his holiday home on Anglesey using his Second World War ex-military Jeep. And he and his brother, Spencer Wilks, were sitting on the sand, and one of them decided to sketch what they thought could be a vehicle that would help the farming community and actually help Rover get back its employees into employment. So they sketched the shape roughly based on the Willys Jeep, of which they thought, yes, we could produce this, and if it's for the agricultural community worldwide, we should be able to get enough steel allocated from the government. So the sketch was sketched out, as I say, with a stick in the sand. They came back and talked to the engineers at the Solihull factory, and that's how Land Rover basically began.
Given the agricultural bit which really guided these two brothers to devise a new vehicle, and as you know, agricultural tractors were always single-seater. So I believe the first prototype which came out had a center steering position, right?
That's correct. It did. The concept vehicle did have a centre steer, and it was all because I think Maurice Wilks was thinking of the farming community who were also being introduced to tractors, of which we all know are centre steered. And he thought that as an open top vehicle, because originally it wasn't going to have anything more than a canvas cover to keep some rain and sun off people, it would be used on the farm, and it'd be easily manoeuvrable. But when the engineer appointed to run the program, the chief program engineer, which was Arthur Goddard, he looked at the concept vehicle that Maurice Wilks had the workshop put together, and he tells me he gave it about 30 seconds of his time, and he said, look, this vehicle has got to be right-hand drive or left-hand drive. And so the project started for real then.
What was the engine which the two brothers planned to use in the original prototype?
The engine they decided to use was the 1.6 engine, which they were developing for the next generation of Rover cars. So it was an F-head construction, semi-side overhead, and it gave them about 50 horsepower, which was adequate for the vehicle.
Tell me also about the legend of aluminium with Land Rover?
Well, because the restrictions on steel, they managed to get enough steel to make the chassis, and they designed the chassis to be a box section construction. And when the steel was cut, almost every piece of steel from a sheet was used to build the chassis. The aluminium was quite unique because they'd got a lot of experience with aluminium anyway, working during the war effort. And also they realised that aluminium was being produced by a company which was called Alcon in Birmingham. And the one thing that they realised, if it was going to be a vehicle for the land and it was going to be used on undulating land, they needed to reduce the centre of gravity as much as they could. So aluminium gave them the opportunity to have a very lightweight body structure which kept the centre of gravity very low and made the vehicle very safe to drive off-road.
Considering that lightweight was achieved with aluminium, a smaller engine with all the power takeoffs, how rudimentary was it for the driver and the occupants?
Well, initially it was produced for the first 18 months to 2 years as a permanent four-wheel drive vehicle. Now, this was quite unique because any other four-wheel drive vehicle that farmers may have driven during their wartime effort would have been selectable four-wheel drive, and a lot of people got stuck before they decided to look at the levers and pull or push something to make the vehicle drive. Now, the Land Rover produced in a permanent four-wheel drive system through a centre free-wheel device, which the company had a lot of experience with because of their Rover cars, was always in four-wheel drive as long as you were going forwards. So this was a fantastic advantage, and they also developed in the front axle constant velocity joints, and so there was very little wind-up on the steering, and each time you came off the throttle, the freewheel device came into action and actually unwound any transmission interference it had from being in permanent four-wheel drive.
How did it do in reverse?
Reverse is interesting. To go into reverse, you had to use low range, which was a red lever or a lever with a red knob on it, and you pulled the red lever back, and then you pulled a ring pull. It was on the right-hand side, whether it was right-hand drive or left-hand drive. It was on the right-hand side of the vehicle. You pulled a ring pull in the floor, which locked the free-wheel device, and that enabled you to be able to reverse in four-wheel drive.
If you put a driver of a modern day Defender in an original Defender, I'm sure he'll be at sixes and sevens.
Well, of course, it did cause some confusion with some of the early users if it wasn't demonstrated to them correctly. So after about 18 months, the system was changed to introduce a system where you add two extra levers to the gear lever, one the transfer lever, which I've already described, and then they add another lever which would actually lock the vehicle in four-wheel drive high range. And if you went into low range, it automatically put you into four-wheel drive, so the system became much simpler to operate. But fortunately, Land Rover had got its great name from its early days of permanent four-wheel drive going forwards.
So I think this low range thing was really one of the biggest attributes to get Land Rover to be accepted all over the world.
You're correct. The low range lever gave you a very low ratio of sort of about 47.1 ratio in first gear low range, which was phenomenal, and that vehicle would crawl and give you a lot of safety when you're off-road once you'd selected low range.
Well, when you have a person like Roger even reeling off the exact gear ratios for the low range from as far back in time as when the first Land Rovers came out, you know that you have to be really sharp to pick up bits and pieces. But if you're going to find a manifestation of this in India, Roger, then you got to go into the hills adjoining Nepal on our side of the border at Sandakphu, Darjeeling, where a lot of Land Rovers, Series 1 cars still do the absolutely arduous dirt tracks in the mountains to climb up like literal mountain goats. And even though we have gone there with modern cars also, I still feel that in the hands of a skilled driver, the original Land Rover makes the thing look like child's play, and that too with all manual controls compared to what the modern cars is. Do you think that these sort of challenging drives are still there in your part of the world?
The most important thing to realise, whichever vehicle you select from the Land Rover family, we never compromise the off-road performance in any way. So right from the origins of Land Rover, its off-road ability has always been fantastic, and the most important thing is you have control. Once you select low range, you can drive the vehicle through the accelerator pedal and keep the brake pedal to an absolute minimum if you're in an automatic, or if it's a manual, you keep the clutch and brake pedal to a minimum, and you drive the vehicle through the accelerator pedal and just use the gears to suit the terrain that's in front of you. But the other thing that's important is to consider the amount of load that you're carrying in the vehicle. So if you were climbing a steep hill in third gear and low range, if you had the vehicle fully laden, you may have been in second gear or first gear. The gear ratios were there to be used, and you didn't particularly have to use them as they were shown on the stick. You could move from first gear to third gear or third gear to first gear. And the Land Rover was quite unique once the vehicle was in low range for off-road use.
When the Land Rover came out in England, it was the only 4x4 from your country. Even though I believe someone else like Austin or with the Rolls-Royce power plant, they tried to build a rival. Can you share some thought about what was so unique about the Land Rover that no one could match it, or they got scared of matching it?
I think it was what was unique about it. It was the right vehicle at the right time, and it suited the farming community initially, and then very quickly other people realised it was a very capable off-road vehicle from what they'd had previous to that. And of course, the war effort did bring a lot of four-wheel drive vehicles into play. But I think the Land Rover was unique enough to, in fact, I think even before the British Army tested the Land Rover, the Indian Army, according to the records, had two Land Rovers on test very early on. So even they recognised that this was a unique vehicle that would actually get people from A to B in unmade road situations very easily.
In fact, it's good that you mentioned the Indian Army. I must say that I myself was surprised that the Delhi police had a fleet of Land Rovers in the 1950s, which they used for crowd control with big loudspeakers on them. And the Land Rover was sold through a set of dealers and distributors in India till as far back as I believe 1958. So, and it was sold for the equivalent for about 5,500 rupees, which is something which we can only dream about these days for one set of tires, maybe.
Well, I think you will find that Dwayer's Motors in Calcutta started to import Land Rovers as early as 1948, and they may have taken the delivery of the vehicles that went to the military. And for those vehicles that were tested there, other people such as the police and other end users would have had the experience that the army had when testing.
I believe wherever we had tea estates or wherever we had coffee estates, like tea estates in Assam or the coffee estates in down south, wherever the hilly terrain, I invariably found owners' first choice was the Land Rover.
Well, yes, I'm aware that the people that ran the tea plantations were very used to using Land Rovers, and they themselves imported quite a few vehicles into India to use within the tea plantations. And I believe some of those vehicles are still operating today as taxi buses in the hills.
Yes. How did this transition from a absolutely focused utilitarian machine start encompassing a little bit of civility for maybe the private owner who would like to what you call use it as his daily driver and also go off-roading on the weekends? When did this shift also start to come in to make it a little bit more of creature comforts being put into the Land Rovers?
Well, I think the Wilks brothers always had this ambition to make the vehicle more user friendly, and even in the early days, they looked at a station wagon version, and this was called a Tickford conversion. Now, the biggest problem we had in the UK is there was extortionate tax placed on any vehicle which not in commercial or farming use. So we probably only sold the number of vehicles that you count on both hands in the UK, and the rest went for export. And I think UNESCO was probably one of the bigger users of the vehicle. That led to the company realizing that they needed to put a metal top on the vehicle as well as the canvas top and make it usable for possibly the farmer's wife to go shopping initially. And then I think that developed to the stage where people realized the Land Rover was a vehicle that they could use for leisure because it had better weatherproofing than the earlier vehicles, similar to the one that I'm sitting next to at the moment. And people started to realize they could tow a boat, they could take trailers. And it wasn't long before, within the UK, a club was formed, which was known as the Land Rover Club, where people gathered together initially as a caravanning organisation, and then they started having driving competitions. And once those driving competitions came about, the seed was set for enthusiasts to use the Land Rover as a more leisure vehicle. And others realised that to open the world up, they needed a four-wheel drive vehicle to get them from A to B, and lots of expeditions used Land Rovers initially. And from those expeditions, television companies started to see the benefit of being able to get camera crews to all parts of the world that hadn't been seen on film before. So I think once it was seen on television, everybody wanted to be part of that family and have the pleasure of leisure weekends away, all pretending they're on an expedition themselves.
Thanks to this capability of the Land Rover, it made average drivers like me look good on the wild with the Land Rovers.
Well, of course, the Land Rover was not a difficult vehicle to drive. And, once you've selected the right gears and you're capable and understanding exactly what the steering wheels are doing, because one of the biggest problems with driving in rutted tracks is that you never know quite where your steering wheels are pointing. But fortunately, our engineers have sorted that out for customers today because we have directional aids in the car. But you're right, the Land Rover was a very easy vehicle to drive on and off-road, because what we've talked about for a long time, right from the origins of Land Rover, is the command driving position. And if you can see the land around you, it's very easy to negotiate it.
Let's move a little forward in time and go through the three iterations of the Defender. We've spoken across over there that the new Series 3 is coming to India. Can you shed some light on the evolution of the Defender?
Well, during the development and the evolution of Land Rover, people initially asked us to give them more carrying capacity and more room. So the first vehicle, similar to the one I'm sitting by, had a wheelbase of 80 inches. And then around about 1950s, 53, 54, we extended the wheelbase of the short vehicle to 86 inches and then developed a vehicle really for the big load carrying customers, and we had a 107 inch. Now these vehicles went down very well, and then people started saying to us, look, we need more room within the vehicle. So the vehicle around 1958 was developed into the Series 2, which gave us what everybody calls the hip point. The engineers at the time called it the tumble home, which actually gave you more space within the vehicle, and it was much easier for three people to sit in the front. So from the Series 2, that lasted right through until around the early 80s, when legislation started to hit us very hard, and some markets were concerned that there were too many sharp edges around Land Rovers. It wasn't so kind on people bumping into it, walking past it. So with all these modifications that the engineers were looking at and the design team, the Series 3 was created, and this gave us things like fresh air heaters, all synchromesh gearbox, much more user-friendly vehicle as far as the inside was concerned. And we actually put the instruments in front of the driver for the first time, because as you know from Series 1s and Series 2s, the instruments were always in the middle of the vehicle and you were always looking away from your eye line. So the Series 3 certainly hit a lot of good points, and it was at the stage when the company was building 1,250 vehicles a week.
Tell me, across over there, how do you differentiate the original car from the Discovery and vice versa?
From the Discovery?
Yeah.
Well, the Discovery was really based on a Range Rover chassis, but it gave us the opportunity to give people a more economical leisure vehicle and actually carry 7 passengers in the vehicle, including the driver. And that vehicle went down incredibly well with the users who just wanted a 4-wheel drive vehicle for bad winter conditions, and also gave them the opportunity to tow their caravans, boat trailers, etc. for their leisure weekends. It was quite a remarkable vehicle that was developed off the basis of the Range Rover chassis.
Okay. How is the new car? Surmise that in a nutshell for us. It's coming to India very soon, I think in the next few weeks, and it's already been spoken about with a lot of acclaim by a lot of people in the know. What is your personal take on the latest Defender?
Well, the new vehicle, the new Defender, is the right vehicle for the right time. It's a vehicle that lots of people have asked for. They've asked for more comfort in the vehicle, more room within the vehicle, better carrying capacity, better ride, better handling. But as I said earlier on when we were talking, the most important thing, we never compromise the off-road performance of the vehicle. And the new vehicle, wherever you want to take it, this vehicle will get you there. It is absolutely fantastic, but you need to use the vehicle as you will have used your earlier vehicles, using high range and low range combined. Low range is quite unique. We have all the facilities where you can put the vehicle in drive and the vehicle will look after you. Everything is within that vehicle that any off-road user might need in the future, for either carrying his family to school in the morning, going on their holidays, doing the shopping, or going on the most extensive off-road journey they can find.
Given that there's been almost 70 odd years between the new car and the original, and you have cut your teeth literally on the original manual actuated machine. Do you think people or motorists have become softer through the years? That's got to be compensated by a lot of technology in the car.
No, absolutely not. I don't think softness is the word to use, really. The most important thing is to improving the Land Rover, the Defender as we know it. Legislation has brought us to the stage where if you're having to put the technology into the vehicle to meet legislation, then let the technology help the end user make a much better experience of their off-road driving.
There is a lot more of sophistication which the modern day car packs in, but it's also what you call hold on to its turf against a lot of action from the Germans, the Japanese, and whatnot. What defines Land Rover compared to all the others today?
I think the most important thing is the Land Rover is always true to its origins. And if you look at the various countries and manufacturers you've mentioned, I think they've always had to use the Land Rover brand as the benchmark. They've had to try and develop a vehicle to match. But we, with the new Defender, have got a vehicle that a lot of people have got a long way to catch up in the future, because this vehicle is quite unique. And my advice is to any of your listeners, if they're interested in purchasing a 4-wheel drive vehicle, the most important thing is to go along to their dealer and take a road test, because I'm impressed with the new vehicle and I'm sure they all will be.
So, what will you have for the daily use and for your for you to get your sporting kicks. Will the new Defender be your daily drive, or will it be for the weekend sporty kicks, or will it be the original which is there behind you?
No, the new Defender is for your daily drive. It's a very easy vehicle to drive on road, and it's very user friendly indeed. And I think that you'll use it for all situations. Some families have two cars. They have one car for off-road use and one car for town use. This vehicle is the vehicle that you can use and not worry about scratching the panels or not worried about off-roading it, because it's still going to be suitable for the school run the following day. The vehicle is quite unique. It is something very special. We've waited a long time within Jaguar Land Rover for it to arrive, and it is, for me, the pinnacle of what we're producing as an off-road vehicle.
Been a very, very interesting conversation we have had. We're running out of time, but I must thank Roger for sharing his insights and also giving us some of the thought which went behind the making of this iconic vehicle. The new Defender comes across to India very shortly, and I hope that many of you will tie in with Roger's words as to what makes it tick with the original DNA of the brand. Thank you, Roger. Wish you well and keep on off-roading the way you have always done.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you all.
Thank you.